Welcome back to the Philip DeFranco Show, your daily dive into the news. My name is Philip DeFranco, and we have a lot to talk about today. But first, I've got a little announcement for you, some promo, and that is today I am launching Project BB28. All the shirts you've wanted, loved, but never got over at beautifulbastard.com for 7 days, just 28 bucks a pop. Or think of BB28 as the Nordstrom rack to Beautiful Bastard's Nordstrom, where people love and buy our custom cut and sew Beautiful Bastard shirts made with premium high quality cotton spandex. I think it's genuinely the best midweight t-shirt out there for under 100 bucks. Well, the business does very well. People love and buy this stuff. I also know that it prices a lot of people out. And so that's why I'm testing Project BB28 for a week. We're making these shirts with non-BB blanks. They're lighter, but also still very soft. I'm not giving you guilt and quality because I want people to come back and buy more. But yeah, main thing, if there's been a tee that you wanted, but you've been holding off, get it in the next week. Because midnight, a week from now, I'm gonna private all this and just kind of look at the data and see, is this something that we're gonna do seasonally, never again, whatever happens. All of course available at beautifulbastard.com, links in the description, but we have a lot to talk about today, starting with this. If the Trump administration wasn't already openly defying the Supreme Court, it appears to be now, with Donald Trump now openly admitting in an interview with ABC News that he could bring Kilmar Abrego Garcia back from El Salvador, but won't. And that, of course, despite the Supreme Court ruling weeks ago that the White House must facilitate the man's return after they deported him, even though a judge previously ruled that he couldn't be sent back to El Salvador because he faced a credible fear of persecution. But with that, where I'll actually start this whole thing is with Joe Rogan of all people. And that because actually before being asked about Abrego Garcia, Trump was asked about these recent comments that Rogan made on the subject of due process.
The other side is making a very legitimate argument about the right to due process if you get processed and shipped out of the country and put in a prison in El Salvador. I think due process exists for a reason, and the reason is it is horrific for someone to be accused of something they didn't do, be imprisoned for crimes they didn't commit, and then live in a cell. It is the foundation of freedom. Like, we have to make sure that these people are actually guilty, otherwise we become monsters.
And in the interview yesterday, you actually had Terry Moran quoting parts of the segment back to Trump and asking,
Is Joe Rogan right?
Oh, I agree with that 100%. Yeah, we want to be careful, and we are careful.
But then Trump, going on to defend his immigration policy, blame the Biden administration, and repeat his unsupported claim that Venezuelan jails are being emptied into the U.S., with us then seeing the interviewer steering the conversation toward the issue of Abrego Garcia, which, of course, is a topic that seemingly flies in the face of Trump's claim that he agrees with Rogan about due process or that his administration is being careful. Right, so just to lay out all the facts, it is true that Abrego Garcia entered the U.S. illegally in 2012. And in 2019, he was arrested, with that also being the year that the judge said he could not be deported to El Salvador. And notably, during his deportation proceedings, the government presented what it said was evidence of his membership in the gang known as MS-13, with one judge later saying the so-called evidence against Abrego Garcia consisted of nothing more than his Chicago Bulls hat and hoodie and a vague, uncorroborated allegation from a confidential informant claiming that he belonged to MS-13's Western clique in New York, a place he's never lived. And with that, Trump has also argued that Abrego Garcia's tattooed hands are evidence of his gang ties, a claim that he actually repeated in the interview. But notably there, one, the MS-13 supposedly tattooed on his knuckles, that's actually been digitally added on top of the original photo. Right, something that many saw as being added to the photo to kind of translate what they said that the other tattoos actually represented. And two, right, those other tattoos, the ones that do actually appear to be real, experts have actually questioned whether they are truly MS-13 symbols, and in general, they say tattoos aren't a reliable indicator of gang membership. And so with all that, a big key thing is that Abrego Garcia has never actually been charged with or convicted of being a member of a gang. Also then, separate from that, we've seen Trump naming Abrego Garcia as a wife beater, highlighting a civil protective order filed by his wife back in 2021 in which she describes being hit by her husband. There, she ultimately decided not to pursue the order and has since said she only filed the order out of caution after surviving a previous relationship with domestic violence. But of course, whatever the case may be, as Rogan kind of said, the whole point of due process is if you're gonna put someone in jail, whether for being in a gang or hitting your wife, you have to prove it. But as many have argued, this isn't about defending the specific man, it's about defending people's rights. And that's also a point that the interviewer made, which ultimately led to Trump conceding that he was leaving Abrego Garcia in El Salvador by choice.
This is not an innocent, wonderful gentleman from Maryland.
I'm not saying he's a good guy. It's about the rule of law. The order from the Supreme Court stands,
He
sir.
came into our country illegally.
You could get him back. There's a phone on this desk.
I could.
You could pick it up, and with all the power of the presidency, you could call up the president of El Salvador and say, send him back right now.
And if he were the gentleman that you say he is, I would do that.
But the court has
he's
ordered
not.
you to facilitate that
I'm not the one making this decision. We have lawyers that don't want to do this.
But the buck stops in this office.
No. I follow the law. You want me to follow the law? If I were the president that just wanted to do anything, I'd probably keep him right where he is.
Supreme Court says what the law is.
And so, Trump's words there seemingly contradict comments by administration officials who said they lacked the authority to get Abrego Garcia back, and saying that they'd be complying with the Supreme Court's order by simply letting him back into the United States if he were ever to make it here somehow. Though this is notably Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem has also just said that if he were brought back to the United States of America, they would just immediately deport him again. Though, kind of at odds with that, you also have the New York Times reporting that the Trump administration sent a diplomatic note to officials in El Salvador to ask about releasing Abrego Garcia, and that they said no. Though this is notably, according to the Times, quote, it remained unclear whether the diplomatic effort was a genuine bid by the White House to address the plight of the immigrant. And with that, some legal experts suggested that it could just be giving the appearance of complying with the Supreme Court ruling, with one notably saying the note might have satisfied the Supreme Court's demands, but adding, as usual, the president is his own worst enemy in court. And adding, when you have the president publicly saying there are things he can do but is choosing not to do, I think any federal judge or Supreme Court justice worth their salt may eventually order him to do those things. Saying, I think if the president had just kept his mouth shut, the government's case would have been a lot stronger. But then, next up today, we should talk about how Donald Trump's White House is now being accused of tearing a family apart, scattering them across 3 different countries, and possibly preventing them from ever seeing each other again. So the family consists of the mom, Yoreli Bernal Inciarte, the father, Micah Espinoza Escalona, and their 2-year-old daughter. With the 3 Venezuelans entering the US last year, reportedly surrendering to authorities in May and claiming asylum. And this because, according to Escalona's sister, my brother is a 25-year-old guy, a dreamer like all Venezuelans. He loves cutting hair, he finished high school, he took courses in barbering and setting up his barbershop in Venezuela. Things got a bit tough in Venezuela, so he emigrated to have a better life. But instead of getting processed and released into the country while they waited for a court date like they had planned, the parents were reportedly put into separate Texas detention centers, and their daughter, she was placed in government custody. Then, after several months apart, the mom's attorney telling ABC that they decided to give up on asylum and request deportation so they could reunite with their daughter. But then when Inciarte stepped foot on the plane back to Venezuela, she says that her daughter wasn't there as she had hoped, recalling, I started yelling at the officers asking where my baby was. Immigration and customs enforcement officers ignored me. And as it turns out, according to the DHS, the child's in the custody of the Office of Refugee Resettlement and has been placed with a foster family. And as for Escalona, he was reportedly transferred to Guantanamo Bay and then sent to El Salvador's infamous maximum security prison. So Inciarte, who was deported to Venezuela, only found out where her partner was when she recognized him in a social media post by Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele, with her telling ABC, I was in shock, I couldn't stop crying and yelling, and her mom adding in tears. They were shaving his head, they had him dressed in all white, and he was on his knees. As far as having any sort of explanation around this, you had DHS stating without releasing or even referring to any evidence, the child's father, Micah Espinoza Escalona, is a lieutenant of the Tren de Aragua who oversees homicides, drug sales, kidnappings, extortion, sex trafficking, and operates a torture house. With him then going on to claim that Inciarte herself oversees recruitment of young women for drug smuggling and prostitution. But this is the entire family denies the allegations, with Inciarte saying, if it's true, release the evidence. Release the proof that we are Tren de Aragua. They took a child away from their mother and they're telling lies about us. With Inciarte's mom saying that Escalona is a tattoo artist and she thinks that DHS assumed he and his partner were gang members because of their tattoos, explaining, my daughter has a tattoo of the year I was born and the year her dad was born. She also has the name of her son and some flowers on her chest. Also, reportedly from Venezuelan documents the family showed to ABC, the couple don't appear to have any criminal records. And reportedly a review of county and federal records by the outlet found no cases associated with Escalona. But all of this is, even if the US government does have evidence that he or his partner are gang members, you have the ACLU arguing that it would need to test those claims in court before just deporting him to a foreign mega prison. And with that, you've got a top official in the Venezuelan government accusing the US of kidnapping their 2-year-old child. And as Escalona's sister put it, the American dream has turned into the American horror, which when you pair this with other recent deportations, right, the absurdity becomes glaring. Right, you've got situations on one hand where you've got US citizen children being deported to Honduras with their mothers, and then on the other hand, you have cases like an undocumented child being kept in the US while her mother's deported. And then of course, there's the Kilmar Abrego Garcia situation that we talked about earlier. For now, while we wait to see how all of this continues to play out, I gotta pass the question off to you. What are your thoughts around this news? And then I'll get to more news you need to know in just a moment, but it's been truly awesome seeing you beautiful bastards win the $500 SeatGeek weekly giveaway and use it to hit up concerts, games, Broadway shows, just y'all living your best lives. Listen, the lineup right now, it's stacked. Kendrick Lamar, SZA, Tyler the Creator, Post Malone, Beyonce, Chris Stapleton. It is a wild time for live events. And if you haven't entered yet, what are we even doing? It takes 2 seconds and next week's $500 winner could be you. And for the uninitiated, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app with over 28 million downloads. They've got tickets to over 70,000 events, sports, music, comedy, theater, you name it. And so for the first timers, download the app, scan the QR code, or hit the link in the description and use code PHIL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. But then also, and this is a key thing, add code PDS to your SeatGeek account as well. That gets you $10 off any ticket and enters you for your chance to win the weekly $500 giveaway, no purchase required. Which means, yes, SeatGeek vets, right? If you've used SeatGeek before, that applies to you as well. Just add code PDS to your account and you're in. So again, scan the QR code or click the link below and use code PHIL and PDS and go make some memories. But then, next up in the news today, let's talk about some Luigi Mangioni updates. Starting with the fact that prosecutors in New York are denying allegations that they are listening in on his calls with his lawyer. Right? And that accusation came last week from attorney Karen Agnifilo, who said that the Manhattan DA's office told her that they had inadvertently been eavesdropping on a recorded call between her and Mangioni, and that the recording was later sent to Agnifilo. But then yesterday, we saw prosecutors submitting a letter saying that's not what happened. But to be sure, no one at the New York County District Attorney's Office or the government eavesdropped on the defendant on a live basis, saying rather, consistent with well-known practice in federal and state jails, many of the defendant's calls are recorded with notice of the recording provided to him and the person on the other side of any calls. With a letter then adding that the recordings of those calls were sent to the Metropolitan Detention Center and the government because the conversations took place on recorded lines instead of ones designated for attorney calls. But then on top of that, them saying that the number that Agnifilo used was not identified as a counsel number. But still, prosecutors claim that in any event, no member of the federal prosecution team has listened to any recording of any attorney call. Instead, saying that a paralegal reviewing recordings did encounter it, but stopped listening immediately upon recognizing the conversation was between a defendant and their lawyer. Right, and all of this coming on the heels of Friday, where Mangioni pleaded not guilty to a murder charge that could land him the death penalty. Because of course he's accused of murdering United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, with the case already being a political flashpoint, but then the addition of the death penalty, it's just made it so much bigger. With places like NPR noting that it's the first death penalty case the Department of Justice is tying to President Trump's Day 1 executive order, restoring the executions of people on federal death row and committing to pursue the death penalty for all severe crimes that demand its use. With Attorney General Pam Bondi even specifically saying she directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty in this case as we carry out President Trump's agenda to stop violent crime and make America safe again. Though also with that, you had the executive director of the Death Penalty Information Center telling NPR that referencing Trump's agenda, quote, in combination with the unusual timing in this case, suggests that the death penalty is being used here to achieve some sort of political purpose. For now, we'll have to wait to see what else comes from this, though we should really kind of just expect a trickle for a while, because he's not expected back in New York State court until June, and as far as the federal charges, to be back in court in December. But then, next up today at a different kind of news, is the gaming industry going through a revolution right now? Right, that is what more and more people are now asking after this latest round of layoffs and game cancellations at a AAA studio, while indie studios are putting out absolute bangers. But take a look at Electronic Arts, which is one of the biggest game publishers out there. Just yesterday, we got the news that they canceled a new Titanfall game from their subsidiary Respawn, which is a pretty big deal because Titanfall was one of Respawn's most hyped franchises alongside Star Wars Jedi. We have the studio saying that they're going to be focusing on just that, but either way, they're now laying off about 100 people, which actually is just a fraction of the total amount that EA is laying off, with about 300 to 400 people reportedly losing their jobs all across EA. Now with that, I'll say the writing has kind of been on the wall and came after two of EA's major titles, EA Sports FC and Apex Legends, heavily underperformed recently. Not to mention that Dragon Age Veilguard got caught up in culture wars alongside gameplay critiques that gutted its sales. And it should also be noted that most of the layoffs seem to be related to non-developmental roles at EA, so things like marketing teams and customer support. Now, as far as the reaction, gamers have largely taken the news as a chance to put EA back in its role as the industry's punching bag. Right, some feeling like they're just constantly chasing a dollar with things like making a new FIFA game every year, and others thinking that translated to things like EA and Respawn is just another example of a company taking a beloved franchise and chasing the newest game mode. Every game needs a battle royale, and now every game needs an extraction shooter. Titanfall's multiplayer was unique, and now most likely we'll never see it again. And this entire situation, it's actually highlighted a growing frustration within the gaming community, which is that the massive studios like EA, they're just not putting out products that are worth it anymore. Especially when you then also consider that they keep making games more and more expensive, such as Nintendo revealing that Switch 2 games will be $80. Now those price tags, they can obviously take a ton into account things like growing costs of salaries and development as inflation continues. But, one big thing that more and more people are pointing out is that these massive companies, they just might be bloated. And in contrast to this, you have many highlighting the work of places like Sandfall Interactive, which are the developers of the new game Expedition 33. But it's a game made by a studio with 30-ish developers working on a title that promised to be AAA size, which is an important facet to this because, they do amazing, but also their scope is much more subdued and don't cost a fortune to make. Or things like the the biggest addiction for me in the last year, Balatro, 11 out of 10 game. But it's also far more narrow in scope than a game trying to be the next big narrative story experience that costs a ton to produce. But then we see, boom, Expedition 33 launches last week, and it has been a massive fucking success. And something that adds insult to injury for the AAA studios is the fact that this game, not only it involved just a smaller amount of developers, it cost just $50. So almost literally half the price of where game pricing seems to be heading, which then led to people saying things like, the fact that it was made in 5 years by 30 people is perhaps the biggest gut punch to the AAA industry I've seen in a minute. Incredible that massive studios with infinite money just can't stay out of their own way when making games. As well as, I genuinely don't see how these massive AAA publishers and studios can retain their size and employee counts in the future. They spend 10 times the money with 10 times the people, taking 10 times the time to develop while competing with agile, independent studios spending less and making more. Right, and all of this discourse playing out as Expedition 33 has now sold well over 1 million copies. You know, as far as what this space is gonna look like in the future, who really knows? Because a lot of it ultimately does come down to game sales. Everyone can say whatever they want on the internet, but that does not always translate to real world success or failures. There are numerous examples of this out there, though I would say the most recent one is, like 1 or 2 weeks ago. All my social feeds, they were slammed with people saying, oh my God, it's that much for a Switch 2? It's gonna be that much for that game? They're not getting my money. And then on launch day, you got hordes of people crashing all the websites trying to buy it up. Though also obviously the success of a console and the games, especially with the new pricing, that's going to be a longer thing to see over a bigger time period. But then, next up today, in very different news, it probably wouldn't surprise you to learn that concerts have a substantial carbon footprint. But this new study from the nonprofit Reverb, it just highlighted how much of that footprint comes from the fans themselves, with a finding that fan travel creates 38 times more emissions than the travel from the artists, crew members, and gear transportation combined. And this, funny enough, even though 91% of the concertgoers surveyed said that they're concerned about climate change, and 94% say they believe that venues, artists, and fans should take action to limit their carbon footprint. So what we saw is that with this study, over 35,000 fans at 400 shows in 170 North American cities were surveyed. And Billie Eilish was actually a supporting partner of it, with her telling Rolling Stone, artists, venues, and fans all need to work together to improve our environment. I have the greatest fans in the world, and I hope this study will be a helpful resource for those looking to learn more about transportation options that cut down on pollution and build a better future for live music. Right, what we saw is that the study tried to focus on the fact that even though most fans are not choosing climate-friendly travel options, they do want to. The average concert goer traveling 144 miles round trip for shows in a personal vehicle. But this is only 65% actually preferred the option, 1/3 preferred to use public transportation, but only 9% actually use public transportation to get to the shows. Also, I think it's important to hit on is this is not like Billie Eilish and people pointing fingers at fans saying, how dare you? People like Billie, they think that it's actually on the artists to help the fans achieve this, setting up shuttles in some cities, emailing fans what public transit routes are available, and even partnering with Google Maps to spell this out for fans. With then the co-founder of Reverb saying that he hopes that this study will at least spark a call to action for fans and the touring industry at large, because it does highlight an interest in changing how things work. Especially because it's worth noting that the music industry and concerts specifically do stand to take major hits as a result of climate change. Right, a lot of concerts, they happen in the summer to take advantage of outdoor venues, but each summer we just keep seeing headlines about record-breaking and sometimes dangerous heat waves. And so you have places like Rolling Stone explaining, seemingly everywhere, cities are seeing record-high temperatures amid hot summers, and hurricane season is arriving earlier due to warming ocean waters, resulting in a new level of complication during the concert industry's busiest season. Shows are being canceled or postponed, delayed, and moved up. Insurance is growing increasingly expensive, and artists and festivals are scheduling concerts to work around heat and rain. Now, with all of this, I think it's important to stress that it's not like it's just the concert industry that needs to change. This is just one piece of a puzzle that we're all part of, though I will say many corporations play a much, much larger role. And I think it's worth noting that while most serious discussions are trying to improve the climate impacts of touring, no one is suggesting that the concert industry come to a halt or anything like that. Instead, many are just pointing to artists like Billie Eilish and Coldplay who have taken specific efforts to make touring more eco-friendly and seeing how that can become the industry standard. But then, next up in huge international news, any minute now, India might attack Pakistan. At least, that's what we're hearing from the Pakistani information minister, who claimed that his country possessed credible intelligence that India intended to carry out military action against Pakistan in the next 24 to 36 hours. With the key thing being that if you're watching today's show, like a little bit right after I uploaded it, he said that about 24 hours ago. And this notably after a jam-packed week of even higher than normal tensions that began when gunmen shot and killed at least 26 tourists at a resort in India-controlled Kashmir, with at least 3 survivors telling the Associated Press that the gunmen singled out Hindu men and shot them from close range. Right, and with that, to give some background with Kashmir, it's a territory that's claimed by both India and Pakistan, but each country only actually has control over about half. And a big thing is that in the India part, militants have been fighting back since 1989, with many Muslims that lived there reportedly being behind the idea of uniting the territory either under Pakistani rule or as an independent country. And then with that, you have India claiming that the insurgency is Pakistani-sponsored terrorism, which Pakistan, of course, denies. But either way, tens of thousands of civilians, rebels, and government forces have been killed in the conflict over the decades. Though, notably, I will say in the past few years, things have been relatively calm, relatively being the key word, because in 2021, both sides renewed a ceasefire agreement, and while we've still seen militants sporadically targeting Indian workers, Hindu pilgrims, and soldiers, the ceasefire, it's generally been held. That is, until now, right? The attack last week, it was the deadliest one in years, and it kicked off a tit-for-tat diplomatic spat that now risks escalating into a full-blown conflict, and notably, one between two nuclear powers. And so we've seen both countries canceling visas and ordering citizens to return home, separating families with mixed citizenship. Also, India closed the main border crossing between the two countries, and Pakistan closed its airspace to Indian airlines, as well as suspended all trade with India. We've also now seen the Indian government saying that it would be suspending its participation in a decades-old agreement ensuring that Pakistan receives water from the Indus River system. And that is actually something that could be devastating to the country's agriculture and economy, which is why Pakistan is not only preparing to take international legal action over the matter, they are also warning that any attempt to stop or divert flow of water would be considered an act of war and met with, quote, full force across the complete spectrum of Pakistan's national power. And with that, we've already seen both sides trading fire along the so-called line of control, which is the de facto border between the Indian and Pakistani-controlled parts of Kashmir. And this is the Indian Navy. It reportedly carried out test missile strikes to demonstrate its readiness for a long-range precision offensive strike. And that as Pakistan reportedly shot down an Indian drone it said had been used for espionage, as well as detains an Indian border guard who reportedly strayed across the line of control. And so then with all that, you had the Pakistani defense minister saying in an interview on Monday that a military incursion by India was imminent. With that, then followed by the post from the country's information minister, who not only said that an attack was coming, but that any such military adventurism by India would be responded to assuredly and decisively. Now there, I'll say there was no immediate comment from Indian officials. However, Indian government officials have reportedly said that Modi has given complete operational freedom to the armed forces to decide on the mode, targets, and timing of India's response to the massacre. And, that would track with what Modi himself has said when he vowed to identify, track, and punish not only every terrorist, but also their handlers and backers who, as we know, India claims is the Pakistani government, which is why we've seen some experts claiming that Modi's tough talk, it puts him in a position of having little choice but to actually follow through. With, for example, one professor at a major Indian university explaining, India has signaled a certain posture vis-a-vis Pakistan to domestic audiences in ways that makes it difficult for them not to carry out a strike in the face of a terrorist attack. But for now, we're gonna have to wait to see not only what happens in the next 24 hours, but also what happens with the escalation in general. But then, from that, shifting gears to a very different kind of news, I want to talk about Paul Kitterman finally being able to take a shower. Right, so let me explain. Paul is a 58-year-old father in Surrey, England, who says that he started feeling a soreness in his back one day a few years ago. And the next day, he says it didn't go away, so he took off of work, but it then only got worse, with him breaking into a hot sweat, going to the hospital, and then collapsing on the floor. And when he woke up, he couldn't feel his legs. But then doctors reportedly telling him not only had he gone through sepsis and pneumonia, they had found an abscess on his spine. And so they put him into an induced coma for a week. They surgically remove it, but it turns out it was too late. The abscess, it had already crushed his spinal cord, paralyzing him from the waist down. So after 6 months of recovery and rehab, Paul went home to his new life, which turned out to be a less than satisfactory one. Because you see, among other things, he lives in a 3-bedroom home with his wife, his son, and his mother-in-law, but all of the bedrooms are upstairs and he's in a wheelchair. So for the past 3.5 years, he's had to sleep on a hospital bed in his dining room with only a curtain for privacy while the rest of his family sleeps upstairs.
It's hard, yeah, it's hard being at home. I mean, it's, we just don't have the room. There's no shower facilities here for me. There's no toilet facilities, really.
That is until now, right? Because while Paul was in recovery, his wife Sasha reached out to a charity organization called Band of Builders, right? And what they do is they get donors and volunteer builders to come together for fellow construction industry workers struggling with illness or injury. And eventually, they agreed to take Paul's case with at least 25 people from around the country volunteering, a long list of companies donating power tools and materials, as well as friends and family raising over $25,000 for the project. With them then getting to work, and in just under 3 weeks, the team built an extension to Paul's home, complete with his own ground floor bedroom and bathroom. With us then getting to see Paul wheeling himself inside for the first time and marveling at this new space that would give him privacy and dignity for the first time in over 3 years.
Look at that. I mean, all these plugs, you can have all your things plugged in.
Yeah.
And you can turn the light
All
on.
that's on and off in your bed as well, yeah. We can't wait to christen that. Be a nice feeling when you're under that. Right.
With him telling SWNS the first night was the best sleep and the best shower ever, and adding to roofing today, I've had a great night's sleep every night since the project was completed, and it's all down to the incredible selfless tradespeople who gave their time for free to help change our lives. With him adding again to SWNS, it's overwhelming to realize that people would do this for me. With I think all of that serving as a reminder that our systems can be shit, the world can be shit, but people, they can make it less so. But that, my friends, is the end of your Wednesday evening, Thursday morning dive into the news. And I'll leave you with two things. One, make sure you get in on Project BB28 right now. I got a link in the description. Grab everything you've ever wanted while you can. It's a 7-day test. And two, of course, remember, I'll see you soon because I got a brand new show for you every Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. Thank you for watching. I love yo faces, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow.